I know teachers right now are into their 40s who are still paying college loans off.
The people that aren't in education complain about what we're not doing in education. You're like, all right, so the people that are doing cool stuff, you almost have borderline a moral obligation to say, all right, this is what I'm doing then.
Let me ask you a very quick question. Is it easier to get a passport than it is to substitute teach?
Yep. Like, be lazy. Well, if I'm training people to be teachers, be lazy. Yeah, shut up and let them do it.
There's two emotions that I straddle, right? Is hope and worry. So I'm worried to death about kids, but I'm super hopeful about the future.
Education wants the instant gratification. They want the weeds. They don't want the trees.
CTE is coming gangbusters for the traditional, practitioners who don't want to even entertain moving things around for the sake of efficacy.
Do we need as much time as we need to do school?
I mean, if you're asking a 14-year-old, they're going to tell you a weekend will be fine. But no, I want to challenge kids.
If you're about to listen to this podcast, buckle up.
You're listening to the Disrupt Education Podcast. Here are your hosts, Peter Hostrawser and Alli Dahl.
Welcome back to the Disrupt Education Podcast. I'm Peter Hostrawser here with Alli Dahl. Alli, what is happening? How are you doing?
I'm good. I got to go back in time, so to speak, today and revisit what a second grade classroom is like. And it was actually really cool because, so I don't know if I've shared this on the podcast before, but I went to a Spanish immersion school in elementary school. And the school that I was at today, there was a teacher that was in my school, and she's still teaching. And I got to reconnect with her. And she didn't have me in class. She actually had my brother. But she, it's just fun to be like that. She was actually, and I didn't know this at the time, because when you're young, in like third, fourth grade, adults all kind of look the same. You don't know how old they are. But apparently it was like her first and second year of teaching. So now she's like 25 years of teaching, but she still looks the same to me. And she's like, oh, that's so nice. Anyway, it's just like really one of those great days where I don't think, I didn't imagine seeing her. And I'm sure 25 plus years later, she didn't envision having a student from her first and second year coming back into the building to sub and help out. And so just one of those like really great days.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I think that kind of rolls right into a really great guest that we have today. We have Kathleen deLaski, who's here. And she is, I'm going to read off of your LinkedIn if you don't mind a little bit, a social entrepreneur, philanthropist, author, and futurist focused on the education sector, founder or co-founder of 4 nonprofits and 2 foundations, and has recently completed a book. And I love the name of this book, Who Needs College Anymore? Kathleen, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's really fun to be here with you all in particular, given your backgrounds and your audience here. Thank you.
So you have a lot of different titles. You wear 70,000 hats. And that's just the people that we love to have on this podcast. But can you kind of break that down a little bit more about who you are and what you're about?
Yeah, it's kind of hard because I don't like to, if I say all the things I've done, it reveals how old I am. But the sort of the Cliff Notes version is that I was a journalist for about 15 years, had a brief stint in government, in the federal government, and then was at early tech entrepreneur trying to figure out like consumer products for this thing called the internet back in the 90s. And then I stumbled into education and college access work, first at Sallie Mae, which, back in the day, everybody loved to hate, which was, the student lender that, everybody owed money to. But then I found my way into the charter school movement and also joined the board, was appointed by the governor here in Virginia to be on the board of a university. So from that foothold, I started this nonprofit called the Education Design Lab, which was really designed to help colleges kind of disrupt themselves and figure out how to come up with shorter, faster ways to help learners affordably build the skills they need for the careers they want. And so we've been doing that now for about 12 years. And I just stepped down from that role about 2 years ago. I'm still the board chair, so I root for them, but I'm now a kind of a free agent on some different boards and working on different things. But one of the things I wanted to do was go back to the journalism roots and write a book, which is, what we'll talk about today.
Nice, nice.
I love that. Your book, okay, like who needs college anymore is something we actually talk about pretty regularly on the podcast. Like what does it look like to prepare someone for college in, the messaging that schools put out versus what parents hear versus, like what they hear from the outside versus what they hear from the school and everything. So, like I hear the title and I'm like, well, what does Kathleen really think about college? And like, what should we on the Disrupt Education podcast and those listening to the podcast, what would you say to someone, who just looks at the title of your book? Maybe they want to know more. What do we need to know? Who does need college?
Well, the who is, I tell people focus on the first word. That's where the emphasis should go, because I'm not saying like who needs college anymore. I am saying who, like, because the point is that the way it is at least currently designed it's only designed for a portion. In fact, less, about a third of the American population has a 4-year degree. And we don't think about it that way very often, that it's actually not a fit, hasn't been a fit for a majority of Americans, what I call new majority learners. They have access to it, but it for various reasons, affordability, time poverty, academic preparation, many reasons why most people in America don't finish a 4-year degree. And yet we hold that up as the standard bearer, as the ticket, to the American dream. And so to your point, like the messaging is so conflicting. And what I have found in my own household, let alone, out in the statistics world, is that many families are feeling very increasingly frustrated and stressed really by the rising cost of getting a degree, and yet being told that maybe it's not worth it, and yet being told that you have to have a degree to get a job. So that's really why I wrote the book, was to help to kind of break that down and to really do a kind of call to action, that a reality check that we're not supporting the majority of Americans who are, for whatever reason, not getting a degree. And where's the funding? Where's the dignified programs for those folks? And where's the awareness campaigns and the building up of and the evaluation, right? The quality for all the programs that should be supporting. And they're out there, but they're not elevated, and they really can't scale because they're not supported.
Man, there's so many questions coming to mind. My first question is, well, number one, thank you for writing a book around this. I think you, with as a broadcast journalism major here, I totally get it. I will get around to it someday. I want to kind of go into, there's a couple school of thoughts here, but my first question is like, how did it get here? Like in your experiences, like how did college, everybody goes and it's the gold standard, get there? Because for some reason, when I started teaching, or my father was a teacher early on, a lot of the programs that we had kind of fall under the new and improved CTE stuff that we have now. What happened?
Well, it actually, I go all the way back to the first college in America, and start with my own relative, who is my great grandfather times 7, who was allegedly the first son of an indentured servant to go to college in America. And it was he graduated from Harvard in 1673, because that was the only college in America at that time. And he was sort of plucked out of obscurity. He had 10 brothers and sisters, and he was given a spot, at Harvard to be a minister, because that's all they trained back then. And he was able to pull his family up from, poverty, I guess you could say, in one generation to a place of eminence using this degree as his ticket to the American dream. And what I find interesting is most people who have come to this country one generation ago, 5 generations ago, or in my case, many, they all have a story like that, right? Where education, got them where they wanted to be. But it really wasn't until like the 80s, the 1980s, that very many people started, really getting a degree. I mean, when I went to college in the 70s, 15% of Americans had a four-year degree.
Mhm.
So what happened was in the 1980s, we had this report, which you've probably talked about in the program, called A Nation at Risk, right? Which was the first time that sort of the federal government, and it was the education department had just been created, right? Now we're talking about tearing it down. Well, it had just been set up, and one of the early secretaries of education said, we must elevate the learning level of all of our students. And so that's when the College for All movement was born. And they started, I know because like shop class and cosmetology class were big when I was in public high school. But those started getting replaced by, college track kinds of learning. So, the people like Mike Rowe, the guy who wrote Dirty Jobs, he'll say things like, education turned the wrong direction the day they took shop class out of, American high schools, right? So that's, that's sort of how it happened. And then more jobs, degree inflation happened. They started putting more and more job descriptions, had a requirement for a BS or a BA. And that upped the ante for people needing, even like what used to be called secretaries, needed to have degrees, right? And so that's kind of where it started. But it, and I was in the college, starting around 2000, I was in the college access movement where, a lot of us were kind of really moved by this idea that if we could provide better career preparation in high school for like urban school districts, that more kids would be eligible for, good colleges and scholarships. And so that was a big push too. The charter school movement, where you had all these no excuses schools, where everybody tried to push to help folks up their, the tutoring and the readiness and getting the right math tracks to be eligible for, good colleges. That was also part of the push, was that, if a high school advisor didn't push their kids to go to college, they were accused of tracking, which you've probably also talked about on the show, which is where, you're pointing kids away from a college track, and then that's was considered for the past 30 years, that was considered like you were letting your students down.
Yeah. Well, what is something colleges should be doing, right? Like the messaging is all over the place. Yeah, we have people on the podcast that, talk about, kids need a plan. And it's, should be career readiness, not just college and career readiness.
Right.
And then if you're at college right now and your book is about college, right?
Yep.
Like, what would you say to that? Like, how should we be advising these students? And like, what is kind of the messaging for that transition, from high school to college or career? Like, if you can, like what are some pieces that we're missing or you would recommend that we kind of focus on? Because there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot out there.
There's a lot out there, yeah. So I think the answer to this question really depends on, are you talking to a 17-year-old or 18-year-old, or are you talking to somebody who's maybe, what you would call non-traditional age to be thinking about college? So let's talk about the 17-year-old first. Absolutely, I still say, and as I would have said 20 years ago, I still say, if your parents can help you pay for it, or you're low income enough that you qualify for grants, and if you have enough academic identity that you can imagine, sitting in the desk for 4 more years, then absolutely give college a try. you can always leave, as 40% of people do. There's no harm in it if you're not going to go into a lot of debt. If you're going into a lot of debt, I think it's a different equation, because if you have no degree and substantial debt, that's like you're almost like worse off than where you started, and because there are other paths. But the other thing I would tell an 18-year-old, and many of them don't know this, is, well, what is your career interest? Because if your career interest is one of those fields where, come hell or high water, you're going to need that piece of paper, and that's probably not going to change for the next 20 years. I would also tell those kids, bite the bullet. You got to figure it out. Let's look at these ROI calculators and help you find the best deal. So the kinds of careers, I have a list in the book, but it's, anything, the traditional professional roles like doctor, lawyer, some forms of nursing, obviously teaching, being a professor, being a minister, interestingly, it still requires the piece of paper. Accountant, which is not one that you would think needs it, but it's all the legal liability stuff. Is I think why that one is licensed, and you have to have a master's degree to be an accountant, or to be a CPA. And so those are examples of fields where you need it, right? Clinical psychologist, even physical therapist, and those aren't going to change, particularly the ones that involve safety or like legal liability. But if you're in other areas, particularly like business, software, the sort of the marketing, the creative arts, any kind of businesses where you're like consumer facing, really, and even like areas of cybersecurity, data network security, those are roles where you can advance using a series of either apprenticeships or industry certifications. And that's where, I think the changes to high school come in, and where we can talk about how we could be better preparing people to be ready to go either way, because a lot of 17 or 18-year-olds don't know, what they want to do. They want to like experiment. And so we can talk about that. But so that's what I would say to an 17, 18-year-old. I think if you're over you might call overage, I think it's a different conversation. And I say, when I talk about who needs college anymore, it's one of the things I give examples of, sort of 4 types of people who could afford to kind of skip the degree gauntlet if they fit certain criteria. And one example I give is my own daughter, who she had a first career, and she's still having it, but she was trying to plan for her second career. She's a ballerina, a professional ballerina. And to be in ballet, you really can't go to college. You have to jump into an apprenticeship at 18, when you finish high school, and then, you try to make it. And so she got to COVID, and she's now, at this point, she was like 27. And they all get laid off. She's been a ballerina for like 7 or 8 years. And she's like, I need a new career, Mom. I'm thinking about marketing, because she had done, a little bit of experimenting with marketing. And so I helped her find a boot camp, that was a 4-month boot camp, cost $3,700. And it was part-time. She did it because it was during COVID that she did it. And anyway, long story short, she was able to parlay that into enough skills to be a entry-level digital marketer, and was able to get hired and do that. So she's someone, I call that a connected career switcher. I give each of the categories a label. And for the connected career switcher, you very well may not need a degree. If you've got experience that you can show, that you're good at, like whether it's project management or in her case, collaboration and, creative problem solving. If you can demonstrate that you've got some of these skills, and you do like you get starter technical skills in a boot camp or something like that, or industry certifications, you can make the switch.
That's I love that story. Obviously it's probably a scary time for somebody who's been a ballerina for 8 years and then
Yeah.
has to switch suddenly.
Hmm.
But I hear it all the time. I don't,
Yeah.
even though I teach high school, myself, I was one of those career switchers. I had to go back, and I hate saying go back, as is what we say,
Yeah.
I guess. But
Yeah. It is what we
I
say.
returned to school to get a teaching certificate,
Hmm.
and I didn't have it. So I went that route. It's interesting to me because what the way that colleges now, and this is just my opinion, and I don't know if I've seen a lot of marketing tactics and different things like that. There seems to be some sort of a little bit of fear in
Hmm.
schools. We're going to lose some schools. The programs are being shut down.
Yeah.
All these different things. What do you see that colleges are going to entail or happen in the next 4 to 6 years,
Yeah.
maybe even quicker? That you're that you're probably seeing already some changes that are coming down that people should be aware of. Uh, before they read your book, which they should. But yeah, what do you see there?
Well, I think there's two trends that have colleges worried. One has been just declining enrollment. There's been about a 12% drop in enrollment since 2010.
Hmm.
It's starting, this past year, it's starting to tick back up a little bit. But if you dig into the nature of that enrollment, it tends to be the growth is really in technical training and people getting short-term certificates and people doing dual enrollment, like high schoolers
Hmm.
taking dual enrollment courses. That's, something like 4 million students are doing things other than degrees in college campuses this in 2024.
Hmm.
But the colleges still have enrollment, but it's not the cash cow for them is certainly people enrolling at a 4-year degree. They have somebody for 4 years, and those big, like the classes that you take at the beginning when you're doing the general education, those are more lucrative than
Hmm.
the smaller seminars that you're taking, when you're into your major. So that's worrisome for colleges. So that's one problem. And then the other problem, which you've probably talked about too, is the enrollment cliff, right? That's
Hmm.
the enrollment cliff. They're talking about that. So just the fact that there are going to be fewer 18-year-olds starting in 2025. Apparently,
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
the year
yeah.
that's starting. I mean, it's not super dramatic, but it's like, I don't know, it's a couple million by the end of the decade or something like that.
Hmm.
That's a lot less.
Yeah.
Just so one of the words that you use that I think is interesting, is you call yourself a futurist,
Hmm.
and education isn't particularly well known as being futuristic. So, and in particular with, your work with colleges, right? So a lot of the work that I read about in, your education design lab and what you have it is helping colleges kind of create pathways or kind of address these trends.
Hmm.
And
Exactly.
you've been doing it for a long time. So what does that, work look like? What are things that, colleges, but also this applies to high schools because,
Yeah.
high schools should be thinking like, what are the future forward, like thinking ways we should be thinking about education beyond high school and in post-secondary? So like what are some things you kind of advise on or promote in order to kind of capture the students that are going to college or college-esque, right? Like if it's not the 4 years, but right, like what are some things that you kind of talk about and work, the work that you've done to be a futurist?
Hmm.
Like what is the future?
Right. So the organization that I founded, the Education Design Lab that you just mentioned, it uses the methodology of design thinking,
Hmm.
which is a great way to design, for the future because it looks at the end user and what needs are not being met. So you really look at kind of the early adopter trends that you see people who are at the margins. They're known in design thinking as extreme users. Like, what are they doing? what's not working for them, and what kind of hacks or workarounds are they using to kind of define their own future, do what they call, curb cuts, like, they're one example that's always used is the Alexander Graham Bell, right, invents the telephone, but he really invented it for his deaf students because they were extreme users that, they couldn't hear the sounds. And so he wanted to give them something they could put right up to their ear. Well, then everybody's using the telephone, and the typewriter was invented the same way for somebody who was blind. So, these are examples of you design for the future, based on the needs of the unmet needs of the folks who are at the margins, because chances are those changes will support everyone. And so an example in the colleges that I give is, or that has been probably the most successful of the things that we've done, is designing with the colleges and employers, their local employers, what we call micro pathways. And those are short, they're kind of like boot camps, but it's more like a short form set of micro credentials that you earn, often in person at a regular like class, but they're short form, and you're often earning industry certifications within that. And we're designing them to meet the specific job role where there's high demand in a particular region. So we've designed about 200 of these, and you can see a lot of them on the website for the Ed Design Lab. And they're in several different industries where there's high need, and we try to focus on the kind of jobs that are not like dead end jobs. Like we wouldn't do retail clerk. You'd be doing things that can map to at least the starting wage of the first role, or at least the second role, if not the first role, are above the median income. And they always stack to a degree too, so that you can get credit, you can get college credit, but you can also go straight out and work. And we try to design them part-time so you can get one, we call it a step ladder, right? So you get one stack, one micro pathway, you then can get a job and go on and earn the next one. So that's probably been the most successful of the things that the lab is trying to help bring bring into the world. And another, I'll just mention one other one is in the high school space more, is thinking about how do we really accelerate the way that dual enrollment is being used to help it be more intentional. Like someone on our team says, what's happening around America now, and it's happening a lot, is that students are engaging in random acts of dual enrollment, right? Where they're grabbing a class here or there to, maybe knock off the time or the price of when they go to college. But a lot of those students don't actually go to college. A lot of them get to college and find that actually those courses don't count, the credit. But so much of it's happening. 1.4 million students are doing dual enrollment this year in American colleges. It's one out of every 5 community college students is a high schooler. It's crazy. So, and we haven't designed them. So what if I give an example of a young man in my area who did industry certifications in high school, and he thought he was on he vaguely thought he was on a college track. He ended up, just taking a course in data security and getting like 4 or 5 of these, really useful industry certifications. And he got, intercepted on his way to community college by AWS. And he's, has worked his way up and is now a software engineer, 23 years old, 6-figure salary in Northern Virginia. And, he thought he was going to go to college. Well, he didn't think he was really college material, but he was going to go to community college and knock around. That was his plan. Anyway, those are 2 examples of the kinds of programs, restructuring dual enrollment around more intentional pathways, and then these micro pathways with community colleges.
Yeah, I really like that idea of the intentionality behind a dual enrollment. Working in the secondary industry, Ed, many different districts. I'm in the Chicago area. Um, we tend to see it's a checkbox. We need so many dual enrollments. I'm sure there's funding behind it somewhere, and all
Yeah.
these, the scorecard, those types of things, and it does feel discombobulated, and it's very mixed. Communication to parents, students, they don't really understand it. So,
Hmm.
yes, keep that going. I'm going to throw the elephant in the room here, AI,
Mm,
right? So, you know,
Mm.
as an industry, educational industry professional, like one of the things that I get to do as an internship coordinator and an internship program director is to work with the community. I love the fact that you're working on these micro credentials and different things like that. I never understood why we everybody just waited for the MBA and just do it there. And I'm like, that's a
right.
great model. Why are we not doing that everywhere? Um, but anyway, I'll get off my little high horse there. But one of the things that we see and hear a lot, especially in the technology and manufacturing areas, if we're going to go micro here, is get AI certification, et cetera, et cetera. What do
Mhm.
you see with that? I know you mentioned, it helps isolate our skills. And those types of things. And it is becoming an agile workforce, which I love. Agile, I love design thinking. We've had a few majorly agile workers on the podcast before. What are your thoughts on AI and where does this come into play?
Yeah, well, I think it's early and change. It's so early and so rapidly changing that we are all kind of, I think, consigned to give kind of what's the word, like general advice that is maybe because we don't really know nobody knows what we're talking about. It reminds me of the early days of digital, when I was at AOL and America Online. And if you had, 6 months of experience in the field, you were an expert, right? Because
Hmm.
nobody had any experience before that. Um, so, that's the caveat to what I'm about to say. I'll put on my, okay, yes, I'm tracking AI, and I know exactly what to tell families. But what I see happening, and we're just starting to get the data in, or a little bit of data in, is that uh, on the job front, so there's the kind of the good news and the bad news for young people who are wondering what AI does to their future in terms of their job, they're getting hired and getting good jobs, and having jobs exist still. And I think the good news is that AI, and it's pretty easy for learners to figure this out, and there are these different career navigation tools. It's going to be easier and easier to figure out, to have visibility into what jobs you could have and what
Mm.
skills you need to have those jobs. That's all, I think, over the next 5 years. And I talk about how AI is the racetrack to help that happen in the book. And that's exciting and
Mm.
empowering and enabling for all of us who need career navigation. Because as college gets unbundled, it will be important to have, your AI navigator in your pocket, because you're probably not going to get it from your college or your high school, or well, maybe from your high school still, but they're not necessarily experts on career advice. Um, and so that's the good news, is that you're going to have more help. The bad news is, it does look, early surveys are suggesting that we are, beginning to lose the entry level roles at, in what used to be called the white collar jobs, right? Because remember, automation sort of took away factory jobs. Um, AI allegedly could take away, sort of the thinking, uh, research, do the marketing plan, or write the social media posts. So a lot of these early jobs, early level jobs, research, um, that English majors used to have, right? um, I was an English major. I can make fun of myself, right? Um, so that is a real worry. What it does. So your question is, how do they need to prepare themselves vis-a-vis AI?
Hmm.
I mean, I think all of us, and I'm trying to get myself to do this too, is just be a DIYer. We all have to be DIYers on this stuff and try out, like somebody said, oh, Claude's the thing that's going to help you, or is it ChatGPT, or is it DALL-E, or like be alert. And if you, as a young person who then wants to get an internship or a job, can demonstrate that you have figured out this stuff and like self-taught, because that's where it is right now. Yeah, you can, and earn the one of the most popular Google certificates for learning right now is their AI one. Sign up for the Google AI certificate or any other course. Some of them are free, just so you can speak the language and impress your interviewers, or learn yourself about how do I want to think about my prompt agenda. How am I going to be a prompter, or whatever that's going to look like. I think that's the only answer I can give now. I think there'll be firmer answers in 2 to 3 years. But if we have students now who are trying to either get hired or figure out, do I need to do an MBA? Am I going to get a degree in AI? I mean, I think those things it's so fast moving that if the program you're thinking about doesn't present itself in an agile way and being taught by industry specialists, then I think I would be wary.
We've had so many English majors on the podcast. We didn't know we're English majors until we had them on.
We're talkers,
Yeah, no, but they're all in like completely different roles. It's just it's really cool to see like, just that in itself, and like, where it can go. Because I think your answer is like, we don't know necessarily where AI is going to go. And be as a young person, it's okay to try something and evolve and have it go in different routes. So it's like that messaging, I think, is really
absolutely. And I think that's going to be even more the case going forward. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Totally. What is something you want, our audience to know? Like, right, the podcast name is Disrupt Education. Like, how is your book and how is the work you're doing disrupting education? Like, what did we miss, and what would you want to share in regarding that arena?
Well, thank you. I mean, I think if stepping back, if people are like either concerned or dismissive, either end of the spectrum of what I have to say, I think my caveat, or my kind of advice is, we're in like the largest skills shakeup period, possibly in maybe since the Industrial Revolution, but probably even longer. And so I think we all need to give ourselves space and not stress out too much about it, because the good news is we have we're a lot more able to learn about what's going on than our predecessors were in previous generations where there were these kinds of shakeups. So it's going to be an interesting ride to figure out, like, well, what are the jobs of the future? Where, like it used to be coding, be a coder, and now that's like, okay, well, no, if I'm going to use ChatGPT to code, do I want to be a coder? I think give yourselves breathing room and space. And to your point, Alli, just I mean, I'm not necessarily someone who says follow your passion for a job, because that's that works out some of the time, but at least follow your like things that you think would be interesting, and if you can be a self-starter, and get some either DIY or short-term training skills, it's a great way to like test the waters and kind of prototype your way to a career. That's probably my advice.
So, kind of my last question here is, as a parent, I have one that's I have 2 kids. I just said there's one, and he is in community college. He'll be finishing an associate's degree in technology. I have a junior in high school who is looking at a 4-year, very interesting degree options. As an artist, but understands, like you said, be wary of, what can come out of that. And she's very cognizant of, possibilities and income levels and, those types of things. We are in a situation where we are able to
Mhm.
send people there. But you also like as people who are having conversations with your friends and family, and this is the narrative, right? The narrative of, oh yeah, your son's going to community college, and
Mhm.
that's probably not meeting, how much further he can go, blah blah blah. Those kind of
Mhm.
narratives are out there.
Mhm.
You
Yep.
mentioned it early. I think is kind of coming full circle here is, we are in this kind of vacuum of college for all still. I've
Yep.
always thought maybe the millennial generation will break us out of that because they're the
Mhm.
ones who got just rocked with debt.
Right. Mhm.
Yet I still hear it a lot. How
Yep.
do we lift up? Obviously, the book is doing it, but how do you lift up these amazing micro credentialing programs, the boot camps of the
Mhm.
world? I've done a lot of studies on this, in
Yeah.
the past 10 years. There's so many interesting things,
Yeah.
yet they're still kind of like, oh, you're going to go that way.
Mhm.
How do we do it? What's the next steps for us?
Well, one, there are, I talk about in the book, there are now like services and, tools that are trying to put both a degree path or other paths on kind of like a level playing field. And they're
Mhm.
showing students the ROI of different kinds of paths and also like lifting up high quality programs that are, particularly good for like a mentoring platform, others that can get you into a tech career. I haven't seen one for artists, but that's a great idea. There are a lot of artists in my family too. I love that one, like art with a, like art as a path to a well-paying job would be a really interesting program to support. You've given me this idea. I'm going to think about that. But so there are, and a college board, their Big Future project is starting to do that, and that's interesting that the college board is actually
Right.
trying to demonstrate other programs. There's also one called Willow Education that I feature in the book that is not in very many cities yet, but they're trying to grow. So I think there'll be more tools that aren't just showing you like, what's the best college your kid can get into.
Mhm.
Um, and that will help advisors too. And then at a broader level, I would just say to folks, I really want to get the message out that like Mike Rowe is trying to get the message out that the trades are, are have dignity and can lead to well-paying jobs. And I think that's wonderful. But I also want to get the message out that there's a whole nother class of jobs that don't require a degree
Mhm.
that are, that maybe are more entrepreneurial, more, business or tech oriented, some healthcare jobs where, you can get licensed to be like a radiation tech or, anesthesiology tech that are pretty well paying that don't require a degree. They might require an apprenticeship, they might require a boot camp. And so
Mhm.
that's what technology is changing very much how we think about either, you're either a tradesperson or you're a college material, and it's now jumbled and it's one bigger picture. So you don't have to think of yourself as, I'm either going to be in the trades or I'm going to college. There's middle ground, and I
Mhm.
think that's
Mhm.
very exciting,
Yeah.
particularly for girls who often didn't think about trade school, right? So they felt
Yeah.
like they could either be a beautician, or maybe a preschool aide or something, right? But there weren't as many options for women who didn't want to choose a college path. And I'm excited about, this new landscape.
Great. Before we get into where we can get the book and people can connect with you, I always ask Alli, what's kind of your final thought here? I know these are master classes, and thank you, Kathleen,
Mhm.
because our audience has so much to learn, and there are some resources that we'll share out here. But Alli, what do you think?
I think, man, if I had to, the last thing you said really hit in a kind of a really great way of talking about like the mindset shift that needs to happen in terms of, career options. And you've got, it's been quote unquote, right, trades, blue collar, so to speak, and
Mhm.
then college. And I love this idea of this middle because one, it speaks to the middle majority of learners in our nation, and just kind of opening that up. And it really just, I have some friends that are school counselors, and I think, the more we can have those conversations, across school districts with the people who are primarily doing that type of counseling and whatnot, and that messaging can get to families and communities, could really change it at the younger levels. So I think though that's where it can bleed into, when you're an adult and, Peter, your kids, right, they're in that stage right now. And yes, you have to quote unquote defend, or they have to feel like they have to defend their choice. But I think the more and more the messaging is out there and the younger it starts, then it becomes more normalized, right?
Absolutely.
So I don't think we've dug in deep enough with this exploration of like, it's not a binary choice. And there, as more and more tools and graphics and resources become available to show all the choices and the routes, I think AI actually will play a big role in that. So
I think
thank
you're
you,
right.
Kathleen, for all like kind of bringing those ideas to light that we haven't maybe combined in this way on the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah. Kathleen, did we miss anything before we get the information on where people can buy the book? Is there anything like kind of last, hey, here's what I want you to walk away from?
No,
this
I think,
podcast?
I think, you might be frustrated. I mean, one thing I wanted to mention, that a site like apprenticeships.gov is really good for students that want to look at apprenticeships, and even those beyond the trades. There's starting to be some in, banking and insurance industry, some of the finance industries. But I will say that, we haven't scaled apprenticeships yet. It's in many places, it's an idea rather than a reality for students. So, but you can see whether there are apprenticeships in your area at apprenticeships.gov, because that's a great path for many, many young people.
To me, there's no better teacher than experience.
Yeah.
So I love that. Well, let's tell people where they can find the book, who needs college anymore, and then where can they connect with you?
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, you can buy the book on Amazon if you just Google it. I was noticing today it's kind of like gone on and off from being the #1 bestseller in education counseling, which I was not really expecting, because it's come out from Harvard Education Press, so it's a more academic publisher. But so yeah, I have a website, a book website, that is the name of the book, Who Needs College Anymore.org. And that has, you can get in touch if you're interested in doing like an event or trying to, organize like a book club or a book talk. There's discussion guides, and there's one specifically focused on families. There's one guide for high schools. There's one for college, one for employers. So that could be a resource for you, even just to, generate your own discussion in your own environment.
Excellent. Well, we can't thank you enough for taking the time out, sharing your expertise. Again, every time Alli and I, we have tons of notes. Again, what we want to do is to help others really realize there's so many resources out here. If you're in education, you're feeling lost, this is a great opportunity to take a look and get some answers through Kathleen, her book, the organization. So thank you so much for taking some time out and talking to us on Disrupt Education today.
Well, thank you for doing the podcast. It is a great service for families and educators.
I appreciate it. And selfishly enough, I get to learn so much from people as well. So for Alli Dahl, I'm Peter Hostrawser. We thank you for listening. We'll catch you next week on the podcast. Have a good week. That's a wrap on this episode of the Disrupt Education podcast. Let's keep the momentum going. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share this episode out.
Do you want to dive deeper into disrupting education? Visit our website at disrupteducationpodcast.com.
Here's the bottom line. We believe real change in education starts locally. It happens when communities come together to rethink learning. If you're an educator, school leader, or organization looking to take action towards real change in education, we are here to help. Reach out and connect.
And we'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. So drop us a line wherever you listen. And until next time, take that bold step beyond your comfort zone. Challenge the status quo and be the change education truly needs.
Because at the end of the day, education isn't just about subjects, it's about students. And when we dare to disrupt, the future of learning is waiting.